The Transform Your Mind radio hour is a journey through the mind, offering fresh approaches to old problems that plague the African-American woman and youth. Host Myrna Young, Life Coach, and Arifah Yusuf, social worker, discuss topics such as relationships, depression, the single life, how to supercharge your marriage, poverty mindset, and more. Tune in every Wednesday at 5 p.m. and transform your mind to transform your life.
Welcome to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio hour and podcast. I'm your host, professional life coach Myrna Young. And in the co-host chairs today are Arifah Yusuf Mortley, social worker and mental health counselor, and Dr. Tra Ahia Consulting Psychologist. Welcome, guys. I'm glad that the gang is back together. Yes, we are the three musketeers. So welcome, guys. I am enjoying our conversations on the air. All right, so today we want to continue our conversation on childhood trauma and the connection to drug and alcohol. In the last two episodes, we looked at Kelly's story and Carmen's story from Dr. Ahia's book, Call Me an Addict, The War on Women. In her book, Dr. Ahia shares the story of three women on their addiction journey. If you missed those episodes, please download on your favorite podcast players. Or you can also head over to my blog, which is blog.myhelps.us, and not only will you get a transcript, but you also get a link to the podcast. So today we are going to look at the final story in Dr. Ahia's book, Call Me an Addict. And this is Kreta's story. I noticed, Dr. Ahia, that you used a K in all your girls' names. I like that.
Yes, you noticed that. Hey.
I noticed that. And it's another plug for our similarity. It goes on and on and on because I named my kids under K's as well. And I think, yeah. And then my son actually picked it up a little bit. He didn't go right through, but, you know, he picked it up a little bit as well. So, yeah, we like the K's. All right. So this is Kreta's story. And one of the things that stood out to me right away from Kreta's story is that, you know, Dr. Ahia's book, the subtitle of it is War on Women, and that means like the men are warring on the women, abusing the women. But Kreta's story starts out with her sexual abuse starting with her biological mother. And I have to put in the word there, biological, because, you know, there's all kinds of mothers, adopted mothers, and, you know, aunts to be like mothers. So this is even more profound because it was her biological mother. And I think it's very rare, you know, even though we're going to give some statistics at the end where, you know, some women do abuse, you know, other women. But anyway, according to Kreta, her own words was her mother was a sick person, and she used to make her kids do sexual acts on her boyfriend and herself. And in addition to that, her mother and boyfriend also had sex in front of her brothers and her sisters. And this started when she was about 4 years old, started quite early. Then she was raped by an older boy around the age of 7. And she was only about 8 or 9 years old. She started very early. I've never even heard this. Well, I might have heard this from some of the stars because, you know, these stars do some things very early. But she said she started working, she said she started smoking weed and crack and sniffing blow as early as 8 or 9 years old. And as she got older, when she didn't have any money, she would perform sexual acts in order to get drugs, mainly coke. She was a good student in school, but because of, you know, the problems that she was having and the drugs and all that, she started ditching school to sleep with older men and eventually dropped out of school. Then, of course, you know, the pimps are always around the corner, you know, looking to see who they can use and abuse. So she hooked up with a pimp who beat her all the time and actually watched other men rape her and pee on her. And after a string of abusive relationships, she got pregnant several times while she was still doing drugs. So she decided to have a couple of abortions, but decided to keep her third pregnancy, which turned out to be a baby girl. She went in and out of rehab several times trying to stay clean, but always relapsed. And Kreta's story ended the saddest of all three stories, because one night she got so high that she stabbed her baby girl to death, and she got life in prison. And according to her words, you know, she doesn't even want to get out, because obviously that's a horrific thing for a mother to do. So, you know, I was shocked by Kreta's story, but I wouldn't say that it surprised me, because I've heard stories like this before. The first time I heard it was, you know, a coaching client that I had who told me that her mother stopped having sex with her husband when she was 4 years old, and her mother just gave her to her husband to have sex with instead. So from 4 years old, she was become the mother's husband, who wasn't her dad, you know, sex toy or whatever. Yeah, I know, right? Isn't it horrible? And Tyler Perry, because this must be a phenomenon somewhere, because Tyler Perry normally goes into the black community and writes, you know, subjects on that. And if you guys remember the movie The Family That Prays, there was, you know, that was built on, you know, the fact that the mother gave her daughter to her husband to have sex with as well. So yeah, it's you know, people that are listening couldn't possibly understand that, but you know, this is the world we live in. So, but before
some people would understand it. Yeah, some people would.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if you've been in that, you know, the naive people, you know, would not understand it. But if you've been in that, you know, been around something, you know, they might be able to not even not understand it, but even comprehend the brutality of it all. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, right. But before I bring on Dr. Tra to talk about why she, you know, shared the story, and expand on, you know, what happens there from a psychological point of view, I want to give some facts, which is going to support our topic today. And these are some facts about child sexual abuse. And, you know, the great thing about these facts is that most of these facts can be found in the stories that we tell, or Dr. Tra told in her book. The first one is that the ages of child sexual abuse is between the age of 12 and 14. And they're the peak ones. Most of the offenders looking for the girls that are, you know, just starting puberty, and they're between the ages of 12 and 14. And in fact, I heard a statistic the other day that, you know, human trafficking has become very big, and they don't want any girls after age 14. So that's their peak age. Also, 70% of perpetrators molest between 1 to 9 victims. So that's also good. Once they start it, you know, they molest. It's not just one person. They continue to do it. It's like a serial killer. As many as 40% of children who are sexually abused are abused by older and more powerful children. Now, in the foster care system, this is profound, because it happens all the time. With all the kids that are in foster care, they're not really related, but when they're living in homes, this is what happens. And Kreta's story has this in here, where, you know, she was sexually abused by a boy as well. All right. So the fourth one is that sex offenses are crimes least likely to involve strangers as perpetrators. Although a small percentage of sex offenders are women, the majority are male, and sex offenders are not generally the dirty old men that we think about that are lurking in the alleys. Nope. They're typically and not obviously mentally ill as well, or retarded. And in fact, sex offenders are usually well known and trusted by the children they've victimized, and frequently are members of the family. Right. They prey at home, including fathers and stepfathers, brothers, aunts and uncles, grandparents, and cousins. I'm not quite sure aunts are in there, but I guess there are. And there is no clear-cut description or profile of a sex offender. Thus, there is no easy way to recognize a potential abuser, and it's often hard to believe that a trusted individual would be capable of abusing children. Now, this is one that we're going to talk about later on the show because I wanted Dr. Trey to talk on this one. But they say that the children who disclose their abuse within 1 month are at a reduced risk of depression and substance abuse. So believe your kids when they talk to you and listen, because I'm still hearing people say, oh, I told my mom and she didn't believe me, that her boyfriend was, abusing me, that kind of thing, right? So, all right, so we're going to bring on Dr. Trey in a minute, but before I do, I want to give a shout-out to two of our sponsors today, Trees of Daymare and Starfish Story Gifts. Trees of Daymare is a melodic jet entity from the mind of one-man musician, Rahad Shahamat Hassan. This project was formed to express Rahad Hassan's darker and heavier sides, blending the uniqueness of dark Nordic nature with coldness. Its influence is to create a powerful presence with music in the beginning of winter. Rahad Hassan was joined by Stefan Nordstrom from Sweden, and his solo project turned into a two-man duo band. Their debut album is now available on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, and Bandcamp under the title Trees of Daymare. Now, Starfish Story Gifts on Etsy makes custom hand-stamped bar necklaces on 14-karat gold-filled or sterling chains with your special dates or names inscribed. You can also inscribe inspirational quotes like Maya Angelou's and Still I Rise, Rumi's Choose Joy, Namaste, or Love One Another. Most pieces are $20 or less. Wedding date necklaces and sparkling druzy necklaces are also available. Visit them on the web at starfishstorygifts.etsy.com. That is starfishstorygifts.etsy.com. I want to thank all our sponsors for this episode, and please remember to support the advertisers who support this broadcast. All right, now on with this show. So, Dr. Trey, what are the lessons you wanted us to take away from Kreta's story, and what make you pick this story to end your book, and also from the other 98 or 100 that you interviewed?
So one of the things that I'd like to first remark on is when we're talking about sexual assault or abuse in that form, it's important to be accurate in how we describe it. So that's one of the reasons why you'll see these women's stories and those folks who read it in their vernacular, because that's how they felt about it. Then in addition, words like molest is different from sexual assault. It's completely different. So molestation, I remember you talked about that earlier in your description of what you found in some of the research you had done, is a way to tickle the listener's ear. Oh, he just molested the children. And molestation denotes, I'm just fondling you or that sort. Whereas sexual assault is a larger degree of more of an abuse. It's against what I approve of in terms of the person being assaulted in a sexual fashion. So it can be either internal sexual assault or some other type of sexual abuse. So whenever I'm speaking about it, I like to make sure individuals know either you were molested or sexually assaulted. Which is it? And so that sends a completely different message, and it also helps the person to validate, I hear what you're saying. I want to validate, and you mentioned that earlier about listening to your children or when folks talk about this. And yes, you probably were. You know what I mean? So that's important.
Okay.
The Center for Sex Offender Management, has a curriculum that they use for this. They've done a lot of research, and it's helpful to think about the etiology and how we see sexual assault. Folks talk about, and researchers have looked at this for decades. There are single factor theories, there are multi-factor theories, why people perpetuate on others, while children perpetuate this on others. One of the things about the stories, in choosing these particular stories, for me, is that they needed to get out, and it was a way to validate. It was a way to validate what women experience, little girls experience as they grow up in society, and it's not just specific to the United States. There are places you can go in the world, Thailand, for example, and you can get a person that's 6 years old, 8 years old, and have sex with them. Oh, my goodness.
Oh,
yes.
my
and
goodness.
there are businesses
Wow.
from countries that will
go there?
Common.
Wow.
And they go there specifically to have sex with little girls, babies.
Wow.
So there's stories. Arifah, right?
Yeah, it's been going on for years. I actually had a classmate. She went over to Thailand, and she stayed with a family, and they tried to sell her.
Oh my goodness!
While she was there.
I'm now hearing all this stuff, so I'm like one of the people that are that are blown away by.
And I was like in high school when this happened, so it's been happening for years. I remember that. She was lucky enough to have the family that she stayed with when they came to proposition them to buy her. They had told her that they weren't going to sell her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she was very fortunate that they weren't willing to sell her.
No price. They couldn't give them a price. And a lot of people will tell you, well, you have a number. What's your number? You know what I mean? Like, okay, $5 million for this kid. Whatever. What's your price? What's your number? So I'm so glad to hear that family didn't have a number. That was great. Saved that little girl.
She was very, very fortunate.
Wow. Okay. So what you're saying, Dr. Trey, is that, the stories that you picked were the ones that needed to be told. Anything other than, what about the mother? Can you comment on that? Because I still find that really unusual. We're talking about men doing bad things, but why would a mother have sex with her child, with her boyfriend? Because apparently this is what was going on. Yep.
Well, there were a couple of women, not just a couple, but there were several women who had that experience where their parents took part in it. And when we talk about the etiology of this disorder, we have to think about what that mother had been exposed to sometime in her lifetime as well. And, with humans, we send out vibes. And so to get with a man that would also feed off of that was no accident because of the mothers in the world. Because it might have initially been for financial reasons why the mothers or people will connect with other individuals, and then these inappropriate behaviors begin to surface that are inside each person. So, it's unfortunate that these people have children and then they could care less about how that child feels. It's interesting because if adult human, if I'm not feeling it, it must not be happening or it can't be that bad. So my child, that's my child's feeling. So I can separate. Sometimes individuals will separate themselves from the feelings of their children and continue on with this inappropriate adverse types of behaviors. I'm not feeling it, so it must not be that bad.
Okay, and I'm assuming the drugs block their conscience or something, right?
Oh, without a doubt. The desire and the need. So you remember we talked last time about the physiological and the psychological components of drugs. So you're absolutely right. Some of that can blur a person's decisions. Some of the perpetrators, the males, they know that. So let me give your mom more alcohol. Let me give that woman more heroin. They'll go to what I want to do with this kid. And we saw that in the movie Precious. Didn't we see that in Precious?
Well, I don't remember Precious, but I was actually talking to my mom because obviously the girl is on Empire, and I was talking to my mom about the movie, and I know that she was abused, but I don't remember a man being in that movie. So I'm not even remember. I know that her mother was I know her mother was abusive, but I don't remember the movie. I remember Tyler Perry's one very vividly, the one that I mentioned, Family That Prays. Right. But so what was in Precious? What was going on in Precious?
So Precious was so well done, I forget who did that movie. Did Tyler Perry do that movie?
No, it wasn't Tyler Perry.
I think it was Tyler Perry. I can't remember who it was, but it was.
Became famous from that movie because she's in Empire. She's on Empire. Right. Okay.
So her and
I think her name is Precious, actually. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Her and comedian. No, her name is not Precious, but it's just
no, it was Lee Daniels, I believe, wasn't it?
Lee Daniels. That's right.
Right.
That's
okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Lee Daniels. Yes.
Okay.
So he did such a great job in the setting, the environment where for the movie was excellent. I mean, the time period, and the father, who they say was her biological father, was abusive, and he had fathered children with her. At the same time, the mother would be so angry with her, "You're taking my husband's." Mariah Carey played in that movie as a social worker, and it came out why the mother allowed that abuse to occur. The movie was just so well done.
I got to go watch that now. I remember her and the mother having a problem, and I remember her and the mother having a problem, but I don't remember the man in the movie at all. Obviously,
the father,
right. Okay.
And it had a lot of psychological. The daughter had a lot of psychological breaks as a result of this, but she was very strong. And that young lady who played Precious, excellent job. She did an excellent job.
Yeah, I think she won an award.
She did win an award.
She won an award. Okay, yeah, and it launched her career. Yes.
It launched her career, and Monique did a fabulous. I mean, Monique should have had several different offers to do other work.
Was she the mother?
Well, in her role, she was the mother.
Monique
was the mother. Yeah,
nice,
they did a great
nice.
job in that.
Okay. I'm getting chills. So this is, this is good stuff. Right. I gotta go. I just remember her. That's when when you're a good actress, because I remember Precious. I remember what she was going through, but I don't remember any other characters in the movie. Just her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. So some people have movies depict life, which is why we go and we enjoy them. So this darkness, some of the screenwriters are trying to bring it to light and bring it to people's awareness. So that's good. All right, so let's get Arifah into the conversation. Now, one of the things that I wanted that also stood out, I mean, the mother's part stood out to me, and also the fact that, Kreta became violent and was so on whatever high that she was on. I mean, I didn't even think she was taking hallucinogens, but whatever she was on, she ended up, killing her daughter. So I wanted to ask Arifah, since you were in the criminal justice system, what makes an addict become violent in your interpretation? And Dr. Tra, you can support it later on, but I wanted to get Arifah in the conversation.
I think there's multiple different layers to it, because I know in general, like any addiction, we have people, there's gambling addictions, people that are addicted to playing video games, any of those individuals themselves as well, can be triggered, to use violence if those things are taken away, or if they're in a sense of feeling, like they need, unempowered, right? But when we talk about drug and alcohol addictions, I'd say most often it is often linked to addiction-related violence, but mostly because of I know Dr. Ahia mentioned the weakening or of self-control, right? And I agree with that, because a lot of times when people are under the influence, their inhibitions are lowered. So things that they wouldn't likely do if they were sober, they're more likely to do when they're under the influence, right? And then people living with addictions that commit violent crimes, usually, when we're talking about their actual crimes in itself, I know a lot of young people that I work with, they're under the influence most of the time when they're committing acts like, like robbing people or, sometimes like when they feel like they have to, go and, defend themselves against someone in order to secure like their habit, right? So a lot of times in doing that, they might use like weapons or they might physically assault someone or mug someone. And a lot of it does have to do in relation to them just maintaining their drug habit. So those are things like I've seen, in especially, I wouldn't just say young people and just people in just all ages in general that have living with addictions, and just also to suppress their negative feelings like anger or frustration. So sometimes I know when I have clients and they're drinking or they're using substances and they have this pent-up rage inside of them, sometimes it's like they lose self-control, right?
Yeah,
and it increases
there's
their
usually a lot of
chances
anger
to act out on their anger. And so that's what I've seen mostly in individuals that I've worked with. And I know there's a lot of research and statistics to back that up in terms of the lowering of the inhibitions, but also in terms of, people acting out in violent ways, but to secure, finances or items that they can sell in order to, keep their habit going.
Well, that's the part I understand. Most of the crime are, can't put myself in trouble with that comment, but a lot of crime is committed by, crack addicts that want to steal so they can buy drugs, or, there's violence in the drug game and all that. But so maybe I'm going to, send this question to Dr. Tra. What I don't understand, though, and I don't understand it at all because I've not been into the drug arena, why would somebody be that out of it that they will hurt someone they love? Not even the fact that you will hurt your kid, which is, you have to be really crazy to do that. But maybe your husband or your, somebody in the house, that's around you. What has to happen for that to happen?
So there are so many different, when we think about a human's, like an adult who has gotten from age 0 to 30 years old, say, we look at why a person would commit a crime of a loved one, and you love them whether you're on drugs or not. You should care for them. So the National Institute of Mental Health has done a tremendous amount of research on this, and they look at drug addiction in a person. When you're addicted, like Arif said, it's an inability to inhibit the maladaptive drug-seeking behavior. Yeah. And so that's consistent with drug-addicted individuals, right? That's one component, right? So the fact that they would even decide to hurt someone else, we look at the neuroscience for that. So neuroscience, when we talk about the role of subcortical areas in a person's brain that can be inhibited versus someone's subcortical area that has not had any substance abuse at all, they can make discerned decisions, right?
Okay.
We look at the frontal cortex, the inferior frontal gyrus, the dorsal anterior cingulate. Those are areas in our cortex of our brain that helps with the executive functioning, right? Like I can make a decision to say, no, I'm not going to speed, or no, I'm not going to, show road rage, or I'm not going to spank my child until I calm down, because I know differently. The frontal cortex has been, when we're addicted to something, has been completely thrown out of whack as a result of it. So when you take, right? So when
remember when I did my research on crack, right, yes, okay.
When you look at the neuroscience component of that, you can have a better understanding of how the use and the heavy use of these substances weighs on our decision making. You see?
I feel like
go ahead.
No, I was going to say I 100% agree with you. I feel like not a lot of people really take into. I love learning about neuroscience, so I'm like really passionate about that. But I don't feel like enough people really sit down and like learn about like the impact of the brain and all of the regions and how that influences like our thoughts, our memory, our behaviors. And so I think it's really important, you know, in what you're saying, because even when you look to trauma, a lot of individuals, when you actually look at the regions of their brain and how it's functioning, you'll actually see there's parts of their brain, you know, where it's like it's not functioning at all, or it's a limited capacity of functioning. So it's like when you're speaking to them half the time, they can't remember half of the things they've done because they've blacked out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. And that's what they mean by blackout. That portion of the brain is not active, or as we say, not firing.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, it's so sad too.
Yeah, well, I know that part of it as far as the trauma and how it affects, because like I said, I've been in the foster care system, adoption, foster care, and the kids that are having the behaviors that not necessarily drugs, but the bad behaviors, and it's basically because of the trauma. So the trauma affects their behaviors and affects their brain, affects the prefrontal cortex, and affects all that type of stuff. So these women that we're talking about in your book, they had trauma, they have sexual abuse, and then they have addictions. So their brain is not firing at all. So I get it. Yes.
So remember too, we talked about how the Center for Sex Offenders, they have done research, as well as the National Institute of Mental Health. All these researchers, thank goodness, right? So we know that there's just not one single factor that relates to why a person behaves in such a manner. And in the climate that we are right now, they're trying to figure out, with the guns, should we allow guns? And it's the guns. Yeah. It's not the guns who are a gun can lay loaded on the table.
Well, don't you sound like Trump, because that's what he says. But if you don't have the gun, you can't shoot nobody.
Well, you could have the gun. But the gun is not the thing that's going to, it's the adult.
Well, I know what you're saying, but we still need to get the guns out of the way. Right, yes, I get you, right. So, but I understand what you're saying. Guns don't kill people, people do, right, but I get you. Right. But the people that are mentally sick, if they can get their hands on guns, then that's the problem, right?
And people are mentally ill who use substances. People who overuse or misuse substance, they are also mentally ill. So there are social cultural factors, there are behavioral factors, biological factors that provide an explanation as to why we are seeing abuse of women, children, and substances as a whole. It's just so unfortunate.
Wow, yeah. That's a mouthful right there, right? The whole gamut, right? Yes. Abuse everywhere. My goodness, right? All right, well, we've had a great start. I'm loving this. All right, so let's take our first break, and we're going to hear messages from Ducky Mays, author Kimberly Bussey Lewis, and author Sheila Fields. And when we come back, we're going to look at cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT. So don't go anywhere. Keep it locked. We're going to be right back.
Oh, the magic will never fade away, as long as we keep doing things this way. We can turn your world around if you trust me. Trust me, we can turn your world around.
Please visit our exciting adventure club at www.duckymaze.com. Pinky and Todd will be waiting there for you with their entertaining adventures, as well as their home and garden merchandises for you to view. Enjoy our amazing home and garden website at www.duckymaze.com.
Attention real estate investors and entrepreneurs. Did you know that real estate investors are a primary target for lawsuits? According to the National Survey of the Court data, 25% of Americans risk being sued in their lifetime. However, if you are a real estate investor, you have a 95% chance of being sued in the next 20 years. Leafy Legal Services helps you protect your assets and strategically grow your business and wealth. Leafy Legal Services are experts at the Series LLC and Delaware Statutory Trust, two of the newest and most ideal legal structures for real estate investors. Leafy Legal Services have the most personalized and affordable solutions for setting up LLCs. Property owners are always at risk when it comes to their assets. Anonymity is so important. If you own just a rental house and you own your home, you have to protect yourself and your properties from any potential legal issues. Leafy Legal Services have the right solutions to make sure you are happy and feel secure. They offer cost-effective documentation that suits their clients' needs. For a free consultation and ebook, visit LeafyLegalServices.com. They are waiting to hear from you. LeafyLegalServices.com.
Have you ever wished that you had the information to elevate the conversation at work on how to build a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Well, now you do. With my newly published book, A Seat at the Table or Part of the Meal by Kimberly Bussey Lewis. This book will give you examples of intentional efforts that level the playing field and yield dividends for your career and your company. The book can be found on Amazon, A Seat at the Table or A Part of the Meal by Kimberly Bussey Lewis, or on www.motivationalmuse.com. So get your copy today and get your seat at the table.
Don't wait until sexual temptation attacks you before you see it as a formidable force which seeks to destroy you. Its insidious tactic is designed to enslave you into sexual sin and keep you locked in erotic desires. How you perceive sexual temptation in your life determines how well you will overcome its deceitful force and walk in total victory. Naked and Ashamed, The Battle of Sexual Temptation is a Christian self-help book that explains what sexual temptation is and gives you biblical scriptures on how to control your sexual desires and unnatural urges. Readers will learn how to refrain from overreacting and falling into sexual bondage. So, put on your seatbelt and get ready to be free from all your unwanted sexual desires and temptations. Order Naked and Ashamed, The Battle of Sexual Temptation today. Written by Sheila Fields. Now available on Amazon.
Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life Radio Hour and Podcast. I'm your host, Life Coach Myrna Young. And in the co-host chairs today are Arifah Yusuf Mortley, social worker and mental health counselor, and Dr. Tra Ahia, Doctor of Psychology, author, lecturer, teacher, and coach. And I did mention it in our first segment, but today we're specifically going to be talking about loving yourself through addictions. And we are talking, or actually, supporting some stories from Dr. Ahia's book, Call Me an Addict, The War on Women. And today we're looking at Dr. Ahia's final story in her book, and that's Kreta's story. So don't want to go through what we talked about in the first segment because we're probably going to run out of time today. But Dr. Ahia mentioned in one of her, and I think her first episode, about cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT. And I thought it was important as we finish up this series to talk about how that helps women, especially with our topic today, to love themselves. So I want to, Dr. Tra, to talk about what exactly is CBT and how can women or people that are addicted use it to help to love themselves.
So cognitive behavioral therapy, it's a short-term, goal-oriented psychotherapy treatment that takes a hands-on approach, a practical approach, though, in helping clients solve their problems. So the goal is to change patterns of thinking, hence the word cognitive, or the behavior, hence the word behavioral, that are behind individuals' difficulties. So, help them change the way they feel and the way they think about how they feel. So it has been helpful in solving issues with substance abuse disorders, schizophrenia, and other psychotic disorders, depression, dysthymia, bipolar, anxiety disorders, chronic pain and fatigue. So it has been known to be helpful in so many different with so many different disorders that people are confronted with today.
Okay, so I like the goal-orientated. So it's like a life coach kind of thing. You come in, because when you come into the life coaching conversation, you come in with an end goal. So in the cognitive behavior therapy, I'm understanding that if someone comes in with again, my experience has been with, with kids that are in the foster care system that has bad behaviors because they're abandoned, they have trauma, that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm going to reference. I'm not a therapist like you guys, So, but when they go to therapy, then that is the goal. You say to them, hey, you know what? This is what you want to do, which is what you want to be. This is the goal that you want. So we're going to design a plan for you to get there. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah.
Well, hey, if I don't understand it, the listeners aren't going to understand it either. So we got to be clear, right? Okay.
There has to be. You should have a treatment plan. One of the reasons why cognitive behavioral therapy came into existence is because that psychodynamic, that Freudian perspective is a little too long, and insurance companies don't want to pay for it. They want to get you in and get you out. It's all about the money. So what's the treatment plan? As you said, the treatment plan is X, Y, and Z, and you help the person talk about, well, where would you like to be with this issue that you're presenting with? You know what I mean? So basically, yeah, you're accurate. It's just not not said like that. But right, Arifah?
I love CBT. Yeah. I use CBT as well. I like it because it's very client-centered. So it's like I know when I sit down with young people, it's more geared around what it is that they feel they'd like to work on right now, or what are some challenges that they're having. And so if it's like negative thinking, or if it's issues around trauma, then it's kind of working around how they feel or how they think about the situations that have occurred and how that's connected to their behaviors. And then really working with them, I feel like once they gain the awareness around the issues, it's coming up with a plan around how do we address it. So how do you change like your negative or your errors of thinking? How do you connect to, that to the way that you're feeling? So that should change the way that you're feeling if you're able to change your thought patterns. And then how does that then change the behaviors that are connected to that? So I like it because it's almost like a circle. I look at it like almost like a circle depending on where we're starting at, but young people, especially once they gain that awareness piece, they usually do begin to see themselves in a different light, and their behaviors naturally begin to change.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. I mean, there's not a lot of success in from where I sit as far as, because you're right. Again, the desire is probably not there, but most of the kids that go through these type of therapy, I don't see them changing. So I'm glad that you are, getting some success in your area. So, but I want to touch on the piece about loving yourself. So, this question is directed to Arifah. So, how do you help your clients who've been abused learn to love themselves? Because one of the first things that go is when you're abused, you've got low self-esteem, you think you're crap, people treat you like crap, and it's a big thing to gain back that self-worth and that whatever. And even when we're talking about addictions, if you can actually think about what you're doing to yourself, how you're not loving yourself at all when you're abusing it, if you can get that love in there, then that might change behavior. So how do you do that?
Well, there's a couple things, because every young person's different, but I think more importantly, it's acknowledging that it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, because I feel like a lot of times people will say, oh, yeah, I know I'm supposed to love myself, but, I just don't, right? And so like it's just facts, right? Like, yeah, I tried all this stuff, but it ain't happening, right? So I try to keep it very real with them and say, hey, it's not an overnight, it's not an overnight success, right? It takes time. It takes work. It takes, it takes effort, and a part of that is recognizing first that your needs do matter, because a lot of people feel like they don't matter. So it's like you have to recognize first, your needs matter. You got to forgive yourself. I find a lot of people, especially when, they've been abused, they have a lot of guilt and self-shame, and they always look to trying to figure out, like, what is it that they did to deserve that? And so it's allowing them to say, hey, you know what, you got to forgive yourself. And the knowledge of self through therapy or knowledge of self through, whatever journey it is that you take, you need to find it within yourself to forgive yourself. And then learning to practice self-compassion. There's a lot of research around that. But to rid yourself of shame, like shame-based beliefs such as you're worthless, defective, you're bad or you're unlovable, you need to practice that self-compassion for yourself. And that aligns, again, with forgiveness towards yourself. And then finding time for self-care. We always say that, but it's really true because a lot of us don't do it as much as we say we do. But I know, as an example, I had a friend who was sexually abused, and one of the things that her therapist said to her was to start journaling, start blogging. And when she started to take control over her story and start to open up, and, she found a passion for writing, and then she became a really big blogger. She was featured on a lot of news stations and things, so congrats to her. But it all started with her beginning to release some of that, what she had gone through writing, and also through meditation. Like, she joined the yoga group, and she connected with other women that had experienced abuse as well. And so then it wasn't like I'm holding all these things. I have a support network that can identify and empathize what I've gone through, and can reassure me that there's no shame in what I'm going through because they've experienced it too. And that was extremely helpful for her, and I feel other young people. And then I'd say gaining new experiences. I feel if you live in your head or just in life with all the trauma that you've gone through, you kind of stay stuck. And if you begin to kind of open yourself up to new experiences, you begin to see that there's a world outside of the trauma that you've been through. And I think that's really important for people to see, that it's like, yes, I've gone through this, but this isn't the end of my, this isn't where my experience or life ends for me. There's other things that are happening, and maybe just opening yourself up to kind of seeing what those are. And sometimes in doing that, you find a passion or a love or a purpose for something. And that could even be, whether that's sharing your story or, whether that is within creatively, finding an outlet for yourself. But it's very important to at least try new things.
Yeah, that's good. And one of my words has always been, and I'm not sure where I picked it up from, but it's been my thing, and about not being a victim. You can't, because a victim has no power. And I was quite pleased when I was listening to something from, Dr. Deepak Chopra, who is my hero, my mentor, the person that has, been in my head for 20 years or so. And he was talking about words that you don't use, because certain words, when you use them, you automatically say that you're a victim. And, I don't remember the words now, but yeah, you can't be a victim. You've got to be a player. You've got to, because victims have no power. You've got to take back your power, your personal power, however you do it, how you talk to yourself, the words you use. the things that you do. So that's good. Awesome. I like it. All right. So, Dr. Trey, I'm curious.
Yes.
After listening to 100 stories like the ones you told in your book, and from all the data that you've collected over 30 years, why do you think that fathers, stepfathers, brothers, uncles, grandfathers, and cousins abuse little girls? You touched on it earlier when you were talking about why you chose, Kreta's story. But I don't know if there's anything you can add to that, because there's a question I had written down here.
Why they abuse it?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
So I talked earlier about factors, the etiology of abuse.
Okay.
And that there are single factor theories, biological theories. For example, they've done research and it suggests that there are certain kinds of biological factors. For example, hormones. It might contribute to why these men engage in sex offending behaviors. We talk about the role of a high testosterone level, which has been found in research has those increased sex drive and aggression are related to high levels of testosterone. And so some of the other biological theories also. Then there are behavioral theories that talk about why men perpetrate or these folks perpetrate this behavior, sexual behavior. For example, a father who commits domestic violence in the home, right, he's modeling hostile and aggressive attitudes and behaviors toward women.
Right.
And so the youth who are exposed to that kind of environment, they may act and learn to act in a similar way.
True.
As a part of their developmental experience. And so when you ask, why, there are a tremendous amount of factors that relate to that, sociocultural. There's attachment intimacy theories. There's integrated theory that talks about how the influential theory of sexual offending behaviors are a result of a combination of any of those factors. So it's not just one. It's not just one thing. And then as humans tend to become comfortable with certain behaviors. And at times they fail to see a way out of that or to choose something else because they are comfortable with that behavior.
Okay. Well, I understand that to the point of view where you abuse your wife, you abuse drugs or whatever, but I was actually trying to get to the dirty old man that only gets his rockets off from little girls. But I guess there's no way, like I talked in the statistics, there's no way to put them in a little barrel and say these are the people. But yeah, the ones that only wants the 10-year-olds or the 5-year-olds or whatever, something just popped into my head. I heard a story where a guy actually abused his biological daughter while he had a woman right there in the house,
Right.
And you know what I mean? So that kind of thing. Obviously, he was more attracted to his own daughter because she was young and fresh than his woman. So that's what I'm talking about. I was trying to understand, what's going on in their brain. But obviously, you probably can't, there's probably not any kind of tag for that. It's just whatless, as we would call it when we were growing up.
Well, no, there are. And I just said there are several different theories that dictate that we have learned from research that can be applied to these individuals. We certainly can tap into. It's been going on forever. This is nothing new. This has been going on for decades.
Right. Or centuries.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. Right. Yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
What's a good? I don't know how often you guys watch Netflix, but I know
I
don't know
Netflix.
Man, you might not. You might need to download for this one, or I'm sure you can find it on soaptoday.com or something.
What is it?
But it's called Abducted in Plain Sight. I don't know if either of you have watched it.
I think it's on regular TV. I've seen that. It's on Netflix.
Yeah,
now?
It's on Netflix,
okay.
right?
All right.
But I know a lot of individuals just watching that in itself, they've had so many questions around how could this happen, and just like the manipulation behind it and, everything else that was attached to it, not just the abuse of the children, but if you really think about it, the abuse that was, targeted towards the parents as well. But it's a really great show we should probably even maybe have a conversation about that on another day.
Sure.
Because it ties into a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, and just really trying to comprehend, like, how could this happen, right? And so it might be something we could break down that may answer a couple questions too later on.
And I've heard that it would be a good one to watch. And so keep in mind, when you are trying to understand, Myrna, when you are trying to understand a sick person, if you're not sick, that would be a challenge.
Yes.
Right, because your mind will not go there. I get you. Your mind cannot come. Right, my mind couldn't go there. Right, my mind couldn't go there. Right,
Unless
yes.
Like myself and Arifah, we studied this. It's what I'm passionate about. So I can understand that. I can understand how a person could be involved in abuse. You know what I mean? So just keep that in mind too as you explore that thought.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, let's take our second break, and we're going to hear messages from Kit's Tax and Leafy Legal Services. And when we come back, because we're almost out of time, we are going to wrap up and just ask a couple more questions, and then we're going to tell you how to get a hold of Dr. Tra and Arifah if you need some more information on any of the things that we covered. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Attention real estate investors and entrepreneurs. Did you know that real estate investors are a primary target for lawsuits? According to the National Survey of the Court data, 25% of Americans risk being sued in their lifetime. However, if you are a real estate investor, you have a 95% chance of being sued in the next 20 years. Leafy Legal Services helps you protect your assets and strategically grow your business and wealth. Leafy Legal Services are experts at the Series LLC and Delaware Statutory Trust, two of the newest and most ideal legal structures for real estate investors. Leafy Legal Services have the most personalized and affordable solutions for setting up LLCs. Property owners are always at risk when it comes to their assets. Anonymity is so important. If you own just a rental house and you own your home, you have to protect yourself and your properties from any potential legal issues. Leafy Legal Services have the right solutions to make sure you are happy and feel secure. They offer cost-effective documentation that suits their clients' needs. For a free consultation and ebook, visit LeafyLegalServices.com. They are waiting to hear from you. LeafyLegalServices.com.
Have you ever wished that you had the information to elevate the conversation at work on how to build a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Well, now you do. With my newly published book, A Seat at the Table, or Part of the Meal, by Kimberly Bussey Lewis. This book will give you examples of intentional efforts that level the playing field and yield dividends for your career and your company. The book can be found on Amazon, A Seat at the Table, or A Part of the Meal by Kimberly Bussey Lewis, or on www.motivationalmuse.com. So get your copy today and get your seat at the table.
Kid Tasks, an application of good deeds, now available on Google Apps. Kid Tasks is an organizer for your children's daily routine, but it is good for the entire family. This is how it works. Parents, create a list of tasks. It could be as simple as feed your pet, brush your teeth, water the plants, do the dishes, etc. Parents, you can even rate each task in points. Family members do the tasks on the list and they get points. Parents, you can even set your own exchange rate. Example, 1 point may be equal to $1, more or less. Now, having collected a certain amount of points, the kids may ask their parents for their salary for their work. How cool. Why this app is useful for parents? Because It will help to give kids a sense of responsibility and prepare them for the things they need to do when they become older. Why is this app helpful for children? Because children will be rewarded when they help out with chores around the house. They will have the opportunity to earn a salary or pocket money in exchange for working on their tasks. To download this app, head over to Google Apps and search for Kid Tasks. That's KIDTASKS. You can also click the link on my blog to head over to Google Apps. My blog can be found at blog.myhelps.us.
Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio hour and podcast. Today we are talking about the final story in Dr. Tra Ahia's book, Call Me an Addict, War and Women. And we discussed whose story are we discussing? Kreta, right? We're discussing Kreta's story. But we're almost out of time, so I'm just going to ask Dr. Tra one question, and then we're going to wrap up. When I was reading the statistics, it said that if kids tell someone within a month or so of their abuse, then it kind of cuts short that sexual addiction and abuse connection. Do you have any kind of support on that? Is that true? Have you found that in any of
it reduces the what?
It reduces, it has a direct and positive effect on the sexual abuse and addiction connection. You know, we are saying that sexual abuse is directly connected to addiction, right? So what they're saying is if you tell somebody and somebody listens to you, then you don't have that. It doesn't precipitate into that. Do you find that?
So if they tell someone, they have less. I think you're saying that they will heal better. They'll heal.
Yes.
H-E-A-L. Oh, yeah, because they're purging. I can imagine that they're,
right,
getting it out of them, and hopefully they'll receive.
And maybe somebody believes them. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right.
Yeah, it validates
mm-hmm.
what they've experienced.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm, right, Arifah? Yeah.
Arifah, you want to say something on that?
It would definitely validate. Like I've seen that as well with young people, the ones that have been able to tell somebody what happened, say they told their mom and their mom was like, I believe you.
Mm-hmm.
Just having somebody believe in them, the guilt and the shame, it usually will decrease or it won't occur because somebody has stepped in to say, I believe what you're saying and let's get you the help that you need or let's get this person, out of our lives. And I found those young people to become more in tune with themselves and more successful at a faster rate than the individuals that have had somebody that hasn't supported them or believed in them, and they've lived with that guilt internally and that numbness within themselves for years.
Sometimes in their 40s and 50s. Yeah,
sometimes all the way up until their death, right?
Their death.
They've lived with that without that release of somebody believing in them.
Especially the ones that don't tell, which is a question that I had for Dr. Tra, but we don't have any time to get into it. But a lot of kids that are sexually abused don't tell. So, and because they don't tell, then of course it precipitates into, trying to numb and trying to medicate themselves. And so that's basically, what was that?
Not always. Some people are able to place it where it needs to be and go on with their lives.
Okay. Even when they don't tell?
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Some are. Well, they find other outlets
a very
of
small
being able to.
Though, right? Okay.
They find other outlets to being able to, and I know that some people go on these journeys of just trying to figure out themselves, and they come to a realization and they're able to kind of move on with their lives.
Yeah.
Everyone's story's different, right?
Yes, yes.
Well, you guys all know that I have a personal experience with that. I never told anybody of my sexual abuse until I wrote my book. And then even then, I didn't want to tell anybody about it, and I wrote it in an anonymous name. So it took me a while to be able to talk about it freely, and I was in my 40s. And, I had all the shame attached to it. So, I never was abused. I was never into any kind of addictions or any kind of stuff. So maybe I'm one of those people that did put it in its place, except that I had that shame. But, yep. All right. So thank you, ladies. It's been amazing. It's been beautiful. Love our topic. Thank you so much, Dr. Tra, for bringing this topic to the forefront. I know by the responses that we're getting on YouTube and on iTunes with the reviews that people are connecting to this topic. So even though we're finished with reviewing your book, we're going to continue talking on this topic for a couple more segments so that our listeners who can connect to the story can get some more content on it. So I want to thank Arifah and Dr. Tra for being a part of this conversation. Thank you guys so much. I want to thank you, the listeners, for listening all the way until the end, for showing your support by commenting. If there's any other stories that you guys want to send in that you want us to talk about, that would be great. You can email me. Yeah, right. I just had that idea. That would be great. Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You guys can email me at info@myhelps.us. If you want to get a hold of Dr. Tra's book, you can connect with her on her website, which is www.forlifeservices-cc.com. And that is forlifeservices-cc.com. If you want to get in contact with Arifah, you can get in touch with her on her website, which is www.liftedbypurpose.com. If you head over to my blog, which is blog.myhelps.us, not only would you see a transcript of this broadcast, but you also get links to Dr. Ahia's website and Arifah's website and links to our sponsors. Also want to thank our sponsors today. So any final words, lady, for our listeners?
Arifah, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you for this great conversation that we had today. This was amazing, and so I really hope that the individuals that are listening, they took away something from the show, and that, if they are in need or seeking support or help, that they know they're not alone and that there are sources that they can connect to, and I'm sure they can find some of those on one of our websites.
Awesome.
And I just want to piggyback on that. Just remain powerful in your own right. It may have taken you some time to get where you are today. Just be patient with the process, and it may take you a similar amount of time to come on the healthy side of things. But we're over here waiting for you.
Yes. Yes. Come over to the other side. Yes, there's light on the other side. All right, guys, I am so happy and proud of us that, for the work that we're all doing. And, we are, making a difference, I think. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Myrna. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right. So until next time, namaste.